1979, the Disenchanter is a curious-looking creature found on page 27 and invented by Roger Musson, which he originally sent into the TSR office in the United Kingdom to have published in the Fiend Factory column in the magazine called White Dwarf. This was the origins of the company now known as Games Workshop, creators of the Warhammer franchise. The Fiend Folio contains all of those fantastically quirky and now quite famous creatures all in one book. The reason the Disenchanter was dreamed up is pretty obvious. Sometimes player characters end up getting magic items and powers that can seriously unbalance the game and make certain plots and stories damn near impossible. So the Dungeon Master has to come up with some logical or at least fun reason why a magic item or power then gets removed from the game. In steps the Disenchanter. You thought rust monsters were scary. Wait until you get a load of this. So grab yourself a non-magical beverage. We're about to get deeply nerdy. Collecting the combined lore of the Fiend Folio, Monstrous Manual, and the Pathfinder Bestiary, number 3, we can get a pretty detailed ecology of these creatures. Physically, a fully grown Disenchanter is slightly more imposing, but very similar to a camel, averaging 8 feet long and about 5 feet tall at the shoulder, with shorter legs than a camel but weighing in at 1,600 pounds, which is heavier than a dromedary camel, but not as heavy as a Bactrian camel. It has a humped back, long and gangly legs and neck, and a snout very similar to a leaner version of an elephant's trunk. Unlike either, the Disenchanter also has a hide almost as thick as a rhino's, which is concealed under a shaggy layer of blue fur, thickest on the body forming a mane down the spine, but thin and sparse everywhere else. Those with keen eyes observing it under strong sunlight will be able to see a shimmer of magical potential in the air close to it, a bit like a heat shimmer. They are found in the Forgotten Realms in fairly specific areas, typically east of Anarok, mostly around the Sea of Fallen Stars. The creatures seem to have some special affinity for the area around what was once Sabrine, the site of present-day Raven's Bluff. Disenchanters return to that area in great numbers every 150 years or so. Their next mass appearance should be relatively soon, actually. The sightings already have been slowly increasing in that region, so perhaps they don't arrive all at once, but they just tend to gather and become more and more noticeable. What is known is that once every 5 years, all Disenchanters in more local areas will have similar gatherings. In times gone past, the population has been decimated time and time again because of the creature's abilities, where unscrupulous types have captured and transported them, shoved them into confined dungeons, forced them into the territory of dwarves and elves in the hopes of dwindling those races' magical defences prior to an invasion or battle, always to the doom of these gentle creatures. In cultures where wizards and sorcerers are a threat and magic is a plague, some villages have been known to keep Disenchanters as pets and mascots. Barbarians might use them to ward off wizards, and those who would gain an unfair advantage through the use of magic items rather than physical and mental prowess, or a king might employ one along with his food tasters to ensure that no guests at the gala have smuggled in dangerous magic items. They often live in relative isolation in the wild, or sad in captivity, rarely gathering or in even a small herd. They do mate for life, and depending on the food source, a pair will produce 1 or 2 calves every 3 to 5 years. The young grow into maturity quickly, reaching their full size in only 2 years. They remain with their parents until they've reached their full growth, and strike out on their own shortly thereafter, though rarely you will find 2 siblings together, having left their mother a year or 2 prior. Most people firmly believe the folktale that Disenchanters don't breed at all, but rather they split into 2 new creatures once a Disenchanter has consumed enough magical energy. This is probably just because females with calves are very cautious and reclusive, avoiding any contact with humanoids while the calf is still very young. So most people have never seen one. Nobody has ever recorded any witnessed birth either. Hopefully someone will bother to set the facts to paper one day and we can all learn about it. If they have any other similarities to camels, they would have a lifespan of some 40 years or so, and that fatty hump on their back would help sustain them by storing nutrients over long periods of time in between feasts, which is quite a likely occurrence for a creature that subsists on a diet of magic. Since the Disenchanter has no known predators, its numbers are apparently controlled by the amount of magical energy available in the area. Most of the details of how it interacts with its environment are unknown. The creature's essence is purported to be useful in ink for scrolls and might be used for the fabrication of a rod of cancellation, On the world of Faerun, they appeared in the region that was being taken over by the evil Faerun back in the time of the ancient Netheril Empire of Magic. So a lot of sages speculate that the Faerun created them, or that the Disenchanters are originally native creatures of whatever realm the Faerun originally came from. But the truth is, the Disenchanters are found on many worlds, mainly because they are naturally drawn to the magical emanations of mystic portals, and tend to wander into new worlds by mistake. Thus, you can find them just about anywhere, and they are one of the truly pan-dimensional creatures present on every D&D world, except perhaps Eberron. The reason they have no natural predators is because they are damn near impervious to harm for non-magical sources, and even then have alien flesh that is quite inedible to beings native to Toril. It's not toxic, it just tastes revolting and causes violent gastric consequences. So native predators just ignore the Disenchanters for the most part. Though there's always a young lion or tiger or land shark that will have a go at chasing one down, they will soon learn their lesson and not bother them again. Players of the game will most often encounter a Disenchanter racing up to their adventuring party out of nowhere, seemingly a kind of goofy and harmless looking creature, but they will soon replace amusement with shock and alarm. Disenchanters can terrify player characters as they charge in, noses twitching, to devour the party's most important magical items. Even if the group isn't already familiar with the creatures, watching a scroll worth hundreds of gold pieces crumble to dust under the Disenchanter's snout should be enough to freak the players out, and a castle that relies heavily on magic for defences or structural support may find its walls literally crumbling under the onslaught of several hungry Disenchanters employed by an imposing army. Characters who have left an important magical portal open for their return may find it dull and disenchanted, with a Disenchanter lounging nearby, burping after a nice rich meal. The exact method these creatures use to drain magic and digest it is a bit of a mystery, as is just how long they can survive in the wilderness where magic is not occurring spontaneously around them. But keep in mind, on the world of Toril, there are magical creatures in the wild for the Disenchanted to hunt down, so it's a bit speculative, but the effects are fairly straightforward. They may hunt fairies or fey creatures and such, and fey creatures would be temporarily inconvenienced by being snacked on, but the Disenchanters leave them alone and don't necessarily kill anything that they would feed on. A Disenchanter is always aware of any magical auras within 60 feet. It can instantly determine the number, strength, and location of each aura. This ability is otherwise similar to the Detect Magic spell. When searching for magic, it basically pings the area within 120 feet with the effects of a Detect Magic spell, a momentary expansion of its innate senses. When it sees a party of adventurers loaded with magic items, spell effects, enchantments, or actively casting spells, it goes into feeding mode and becomes quite aggressive. Let's give this creature some stats, shall we? They're a lot smarter than they look, with an average intelligence ranging from 8 to 10. You may want to get a pen and jot this down. They have a size category large, with a strength of 18, dexterity of 10, constitution of 12, wisdom of 11, and charisma of 7, which is more like 15 when a magic-laden adventurer knows what is about to happen. The Disenchanter has an armor class of 10 and 40 hit points, with a speed of 40 feet per round and a passive perception of 10. They have a hoofed foot attack that is +6 to hit and inflicts 2d4 +4 bludgeoning damage on one target within 5 feet of them as a secondary attack each round, but the main attack is their tongue and prehensile trunk. A Disenchanter's tongue is coated with a powerful adhesive that allows it to hold creatures or items fast in order to feed. This adhesive gives the Disenchanter advantage on grapple checks and may allow them to latch onto a weapon and disarm an opponent by just snatching it out of their hands, with the target making an opposed strength check. They can use the tongue to grapple and constrict any creature of a lower size category than large. That long and sticky tongue is the strongest part of the Disenchanter, capable of actually crushing the life out of someone just like a constrictor snake. +6 to hit one target, it has a 15-foot reach, which the Disenchanter knows will catch most targets off guard and use to its best advantage. It inflicts 1d8 +4 bludgeoning damage and grapples the target with an escape DC of 16. Until the grapple ends, the target will be restrained, and the Disenchanter can choose to inflict further bludgeoning damage each round or not. Generally, if actively feeding on magic energy, it will not be inflicting crushing damage at the same time. The Disenchanter is able to tell which are the strongest magical energies and will target those first. with some exceptions. For example, they will not go after actual magical artifacts. For instance, a disenchanter would choose to attack a longsword +3 instead of the shield +2. A disenchanter is smart enough to attack easier targets, for example, trying to hit a magical shield in a hand rather than a magical wand in a backpack. The creature's snout is, however, very dexterous and can hit objects in somewhat difficult positions, such as a magical dagger in its scabbard with only the hilt showing. To hit a magical item, the disenchanter makes a normal attack roll. The item's armor class is 10, adjusted by its magical bonus, if any, and by the dexterity adjustment of the individual carrying it, if any. The Dungeon Master should also adjust the item's armor class for cover, so a partially concealed item gets a +2 bonus to armor class. A mostly concealed item gets a +5 bonus to armor class, those are just standard, while a totally concealed item can't be struck by the disenchanter. These penalties are left mostly to the Dungeon Master's discretion, though, as they should. An item struck by a disenchanter's snout is permanently drained of its magic. Items with special effects count each of those as a +1 bonus, so a +2 flying frost sword of Efreet slaying would lose those effects one by one. First the flying property, then the frost, then the Efreet slaying, and then become a +1 sword, and then just become a regular sword. Well-made sword. A disenchanter can also target a spell effect. A lasting stationary spell effect is instantly dispelled when touched by the disenchanter's nose. Such a spell effect has an armor class of 10 and does not harm the disenchanter when they do so. If attacked with a spell, the disenchanter has a chance to intercept the spell, if the spell has a visible effect. Such a spell, like even a magic missile, has a base armor class of 15. An area effect spell can't be intercepted by the disenchanter unless the spell is targeting directly the creature. Now, you may be thinking, pretty puny. The adventurers will be able to take this thing out in a single round with that armor class and feeble hit point total. Well, there is a very good reason the creature has no natural predators. A disenchanter can only be physically wounded by magical weapons and spells. Normal bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage from non-magical weapons just seems to get deflected from that shimmering aura around the creature. Luckily, only the snout drains enchantments, so magical weapons are not harmed from striking the disenchanter's body. Disenchanters are not immune to extreme cold or heat, lightning bolts, pools of acid, and so on, but will barely notice a bunch of arrows and crossbow bolts being shot at them. If no magic is present, as mentioned, they are passive and gentle creatures. Some are even smart enough to understand spoken language, and there are tales of disenchanters who have actually learned how to speak Common or Elven. The disenchanters certainly have their own language, and when they do gather together, they share a lot of information about the wider world that each individual or mated pair have encountered on their travels. Disenchanters can carry a medium-sized humanoid or smaller and act as a mount, just as one would ride a camel, with the added advantage of not needing to feed them like a regular camel or horse. However, when the disenchanter encounters magic, trouble is going to ensue. If you like the lore in these videos, don't forget to check out videos by fellow Forgotten Realms lore masters. Check out my channels tab where I have a list of them for you to explore, such as Mr. Rex, Dungeon Dad, Jordan, Forgotten Realms History, WebDM, and World of Monsters. Please hit the like button and subscribe if you think I deserve one of those shiny silver play buttons from YouTube on my bookshelf. Check out links down below. Thank you for your support and thanks for listening. As always, I'll be back with more for you very soon. Hey there everyone, AJ back again for the Mighty Gluestick channel. I make videos about Dungeons & Dragons lore full-time and have a collection of over 600 videos on monster ecology, fantasy, world history, character classes, and magic items on my channel. If you like what I do, please consider becoming a member of the channel by clicking the join button down below, or backing me on Patreon, where you can get access to all of the scripts I write for these vids. Members of either also become members of the Secretive Gluminati on my Discord server, and of course, subscribing to me here as I upload at least twice a week and have a live stream every weekend. Also, I'll be bumping up the bandwidth level on my Discord so you can run clearer, better video chat games. Continuing on with our demon series, where an attempt is made to catalogue and describe every named demon form in the Dungeons & Dragons role-playing game, I've had a request to cover the very powerful Tanar'ri demon known as the Molideus, or the plural Molidii. It is said that they are the original angels that Tharizdun set to guard the Shard of Ultimate Evil. It is said that there exists only one for each layer of the Abyss. It is said that even the mighty Baelor fear them, and it is said that they alone, among the chaotic Tanar'ri, are the enforcers of law and order. None of that is true. What is true is that the Molidii are the chosen champions of the Demon Lords, and it is true that there is only one per Demon Lord, because there can only be one per Demon Lord. They're not like other Tanar'ri. They were not one of the original Tanar'ri forms created by the Queen of Chaos. They are not part of the transformative cycle of the species, so a demon doesn't have to reach a certain level of power before it can become a Molideus. They are instead selected by a demon lord, and using a ritual more ancient than the crystal spheres, they are transformed and empowered by the demon lords directly. First, what are these things? What do they look like? Well, they are 12 feet, or 3.65 meters tall, deep red-skinned humanoids with a very muscular and powerful build. They have two heads, one a savage canine head with eyes that miss absolutely nothing going on in front of it, endowed with godlike true sight shining forth from eyes of silvery hue. The other head, on a long neck and scanning everything going on behind them, is that of a venomous serpent. They don't have a tail, wings, or the usual horns, spines, scales, and so on. They do have wicked claws, and they carry a massive weapon. Most typically, it's depicted as a twin-bladed ornate axe, but it's normally the style of signature weapon associated with the Demon Lord, and it's always very heavily enchanted with demonic magic, so much so that when and if the Molideus is killed, its weapon melts and dissolves into a puddle of demon ichor, but more on that in a moment. They vary considerably beyond this basic form. Some wear armour, others do not. Some wear nothing but a flowing cape or a cloak of blood-soaked black fabric. Some clothe themselves in illusionary images of writhing maggots, or skinned demons who are somehow still alive and horribly stitched together like living garments. Some wear nothing but grim trophies taken from the bodies of those they have slain, so a vest of tongues and a cloak of rotting eyeballs, for example. They're also very much tied to the particular aesthetic of the Demon Lord who created them. Well, transformed and massively empowered them would be a more accurate term, as would the word possessed. Numerous times I've talked about the nature of demons and the dangers of the corrupting energy. I have compared them to elementals in that they are able to exist without a body. They are the spirits of evil entities from another multiverse, one with quite different broken laws of physics. Many entities exist in the Abyss that are called demons by those who don't know any better, but the original Oberith fled their dying multiverse and escaped into the dimensions of mind, and the nightmare dimensions where imagination and reality become mixed up, a place we call the Far Realm. From there, transformed into non-physical concepts of their former selves, the strongest of them found a means to break through, using the Far Realm as a doorway into the Dungeons & Dragons multiverse. The original Oberith entities were mostly reduced to a screaming and tortured maelstrom of demented and shattered parts of beings, like memories and emotions that have been fragmented and no longer know who or what they once were, but just that they were trapped and are still alive, being torn at and fed upon by every other part, each in a desperate attempt to reform into an actual mind. Those supremely powerful minds which survived this process intact became the Oberith Lords, Dagon, Ugadenk, Obox Ob, Pale Knight, Pazuzu, and many others, while some lesser beings managed to cling to those more powerful entities and come through relatively intact, reforming in nightmarish physical forms that don't obey the physical laws as native beings of the D&D multiverse, such as the Cybriacs, the Golothama, and the Wastrolith. For the vast majority of the rest of the lesser minds of the broken multiverse, they remained a frothing mass of spiritual energy, capable, like elementals, of transforming ordinary matter spontaneously into a physical body to inhabit. Unlike elementals, though, the inert matter doesn't return to its normal natural state once the spirit of the elemental leaves it. The corruption of the Oberth spirits is far more insidious and destructive. It was quite an innovation when the Queen of Chaos figured out that she could use the loathsome floating heads of the Cybriacs to tap into and channel the tormented spirit mass of the lesser Oberth entities and craft specific physical forms. How she did this was to have the Cybriacs latch onto specific emotions or concepts within the massive and alien minds, and use that to siphon off energy, fragments that matched that emotion, memory or concept from the demonic spirit mass, and from that she began to create the Tanari race, her own army of minions, and through that created a form of liberation for the trapped and tortured remnants of her original species. When demons are destroyed, they have to reform again through spawning pits, and they have to fight their way through the nightmare remnants of shattered Oberth spirits all over again. And the process is extremely taxing on their own accumulated spiritual power, because just like elementals, they're made up of spiritual fragments. They don't have one distinct soul like mortal creatures do. Demons and elementals have spiritual essence, more like a pool of water. If you take a cup of it, it makes a lesser demon form. If you pour more and more cups of water into it, it becomes a greater demon. And if it's an Olympic-sized swimming pool, it's getting close to becoming a demon lord, which is basically a lake of spiritual essence, so massive you can dip your cup into it for years on end and not even make a dent. Okay, so when a demon lord creates a Molideus, there is a pouring of demonic energy into another demon form, massively empowering it. And the magic, the ritual used to do this, was designed into Tanari when their species was constructed by the Queen of Chaos. These triggers, these functions, this underlying system rankles them. They hate looking at each other and looking like each other. They hate the order, the law of it. This is why the Queen of Chaos so masterfully bamboozled Obox Ob and the Oberth Lords. The most chaotic thing she could have done was impose law and order on their fundamental chaos and mayhem. They never expected it. The Molideus is also the personification of that principle. They're about as close as you can get to law and order being manifested within the ranks of the demonic hordes. To the Molideus, the Tanari were created for a purpose. They are a force of destruction and transformation. All true Tanari should, at all times, be working towards the destruction of the forces of law and goodness. They should be devoting all of their rage and energy to destroying the forces of the Nine Hells and winning the Blood War. They don't care about the mewling masses of non-Tanari which spontaneously form from the spawning pits. They will mow them down or funnel them in strategic directions if need be, nor do they care much about the other fiendish races, such as the Yugoloths or the Night Hags. They're merely parasites who have become part of the tactics of the war effort, such as the chaotic Slardy and the occasional interloping mortal, or the detested Celestials when they dare to leave their safe and lofty conceptual realms and risk becoming mired in the Blood War. The creation process ties into some of the original primordial magic, and thus, when a demon pours a great deal of personal spiritual power into, and then permanently bonds with the new Molideus, its link is manifested as the serpent head that sprouts from the new demon's shoulders. It's through the serpent head that the demon lord sees all and hears all that the Molideus does, and through the serpent head that it speaks, issuing orders directly to its minions. The Molideus are literally the loudspeakers of the demon lords. They allow the demon lord to keep close and personal tabs on more than one place at the same time, which is obviously a huge tactical advantage. In the Fiendish Codex 1 Horde of the Abyss, we learn that the Molidii have much more than just political power thanks to this direct connection to the demon lord. They're also able to bust other demons back to being nothing more than pathetic manes. The very concept of being reduced to a barely sapient, wretched weakling is a proposition quite terrifying to nearly all demons. If they lose that much power and are then destroyed before they can manage to accumulate the power back again, there's no way they will remain mentally intact, respawning as essentially a blank slate, all past memories stripped away. Just more fragments for the nightmare. Demons know there is worse things than not existing at all, and that would be one of them. Molidii serve a specific demon lord, even as they work under the tactical authority of a dominant Balor. They do so for the sake of the war effort and to keep tabs on the Balor's performance, at the same time that they are relaying information from the demon lord to its Balor generals, so to speak. This sounds much more organised than it really is. More often than not, the Molidii roam the abyss, seeking out other demons to enlist into the blood war, swelling the ranks of the demon lords. Molidii are typically found working as a lone wolf, or with a small entourage of very experienced, capable demons, typically Mariliths, which they enjoy working with. A Molideus has the authority to summon Balors, cleriches, and other powerful demons in its missions as an enforcer of the Demon Lord's will, and though they are physically more formidable than the Molidii, the greater demons also never risk what would happen to them should they refuse a summons or lash out at the Demon Lord's own agent. They certainly could, but it would end badly for them. Molidii can also summon Chasme or Babao demons at will, forming a larger press gang force in order to crack heads and dominate mobs of unruly demons. Together, they recruit and punish as they see fit. It is possible for a powerful spellcaster to actually summon a Molidii, but they are notoriously dangerous and almost impossible to control, due to their link to the Demon Lord. Now, about that weapon they carry. The Molidii is bound to its weapon, and if it is stolen, they will hunt after whoever stole it until such time as they reclaim it, and slowly and horribly kill whoever stole it. The reason why they are bound to the weapon is because they share life force with it. The weapon itself is actually another form of demon. If the weapon is destroyed, or it is obvious that they're never going to be able to get it back, they will then make the arduous journey all the way to the 400th layer of the Abyss and have another one forged for them. A process which takes at least 8 hours of intense ritual casting and uses a large number of mains demons as part of the raw materials. When the new weapon is formed, the bonding takes place, and wherever the old weapon is, it then melts away into a puddle of ichor. Now, if you want to get creative, and who doesn't, think of combining a weapon with the thematic traits of a specific demon lord and the traits of a type of demon other than mains, which could be a part of this weapon's creation. What does a Garistro Axe of Orcus look like? What can it do? How would the Molidii of Orcus look and behave? The possibilities are enormous. So what's on the 400th layer of the Abyss? Well, this place is known as the Mountain of Woe. This is the realm of the Nalfeshni Lords of Woe. It is said that the Nalfeshni Lords of this realm, seated on their flaming thrones of hatred, have the power to determine whether new petitioners to the Abyss, otherwise known as the souls who fall to this realm after they die and are judged to be worthless scumbags. It is on this layer that it's determined if they are transformed into either larvae, mains, dretches, or rutakin. There's also rumours of the Nalfeshni's power to promote or demote generals in the Blood War, and of course, with an endless supply of these least demon scum and toadies, they have developed a roaring trade in weapons and armour made using these demons as raw components. The Molidii themselves are victims of horrific transformative torture as well, really. They are selected from the demons in a demon lord's host, and they have to be from the true Tanari stock. Usually it's the ones who perform acts of particular ferocity, especially to other demons, or show incredibly devious cunning, or a spark of high intelligence, which is most desired, since the physical form of the demon is going to be completely altered anyway. Also, those that display acts of genuine devotion bordering on worship of the demon lord are those that it selects. The typical reaction of the chosen is sheer terror and pleading for mercy, as the process itself is well known to be one of the most excruciatingly painful, tormenting processes. The final step being the bonding with the serpent avatar of the demon lord and having that extremely powerful will grafted to their mind and demon essence permanently. This is a rare event. The Abyss is so vast and convoluted that it's very rare for a Molidii to encounter another of its kind, and anyway, no two of them exactly alike. Molidii are always under the constant and close scrutiny of their demon lord, thus they are unable to betray their lord. They simply don't have any choice or chance to do so. The demon lords will often safeguard artifacts known as their demon amulet and other powerful weapons in their warfare. Basically, the demon amulets are a horcrux in which the demon lord squirrels away a sizable chunk of their demonic power, just in case. The amulets are a safeguard, but they are also a risk, as to acquire one of them is to gain access and some potential control over that demon lord's spiritual being. As long as the amulet survives, the demon lord has the ability to return from seemingly utter destruction, so they are very, very important to them. Also, going off script a little bit, as I mentioned, a significant chunk of demonic power is like a demon essence in and of itself. So if the amulet is damaged or broken, there's a possibility that a powerful demon lord could spontaneously manifest and be a source of competition to the demon lord that it originally came from. So it's something to think about. Most recently showcased and statted out for the pages of Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes, on page 134 we find the listing. It's a very faithful to the original concept and suitably formidable for the Molidii. At a challenge rating of 21, this is a fearsome foe. It's a rare event that player characters are going to encounter Molidii all on its own, of course. It will most likely be down lounging in a squalid paradise of its own devising, somewhere on one of the countless ruined plains that make up the abyss. They might be sitting on a huge pile of trophies and spoils of war, simply pondering past victories. They might be the centre of a massive pavilion, a carnival of torments where they have tasked demon hunters to hunt down and bring them back mortal creatures who have stumbled onto the abyss from across the multiverse, with the final fate of these poor souls now being a slow and deliberately cruel bite from the Molydeuce's serpent fangs and a horrid transformation into a main stretch or rudderkin, thanks to the venom's supernatural effects. Most of the time, however, they will have a number of closely attending Babaus, Marilith and Casmaes surrounding them like loyal captains, who in turn are in command of their own hit squads of other demons and fiends. If a Molydeuce does show up on a Prime Material world, they are a very sure sign that the attention of a demon lord is very much focused on that place, and that's never a good thing. Please hit the like button if you made it this far, subscribe if you like what I do, check out my Patreon for the exclusive content and all the full scripts for these videos. This channel is now represented on the low-cost monthly subscription platform Viewer Prime. Go sign up with my code AJ Pickett to support me, support creative freedom free of advertisers' unwelcome influences, and give YouTube some competition. Buy some of my swanky merchandise, wear your geek with pride, and as always, thanks for listening, and I'll be back with more for you very soon. Hey there everyone, AJ back again for the Mighty Gluestick channel. I make videos about Dungeons & Dragons lore full-time and have a collection of over 700 videos uploading twice a week with a live stream every weekend. Normally I'd say sit back and grab yourself a beverage, we're about to get deeply nerdy, but today don't grab anything to eat or drink. This video is probably going to put you off your food for a little while, because right now it's time to talk about Obox Ob, former prince of the Abyss. The one being in the multiverse that causes Demogorgon to stop in his tracks and look over his shoulder. We'll be talking about the very genesis and nature of the Abyss, the fate of Obox Ob and the rise of the Queen of Chaos and the Tanar'ri demons. We shall be plunging into the very limits of the most corrupted planes and get to the very heart of what demons are and what they're doing. There is a need, I think, for an expansion on the lore, and some parts of what I'm about to present to you are assumptions and concepts grounded in published lore, but for some parts there is no reference you can go and check. My intention here is to convey a plausible origin, some backstory and additional detail, where previously authors had just waved their hands in the air and said, it's cosmic horror, or it's in the style of H.P. Lovecraft, or it's unknowable, or it's before the recordings of any living race. I know you want more, so here it is. In a fantasy multiverse where powerful beings can travel through time and reorganize reality itself, talking about beginnings is not as specific and finite a concept as we'd like to believe. There are many beginnings in the D&D multiverse. So let's instead say here we're talking about the end of one multiverse and the beginning of another, from the demon's point of view. In a nightmare multiverse where evil and chaos were the dominant traits of pretty much everything, incredibly powerful life forms had destabilized their dying reality to the point that it could no longer sustain any form of life at all. They existed in demi-planes and parasite dimensions totally under their own control, each with the power of a god within their own pocket realities. But the very fabric that contained these structures was unraveling at the seams, and every life form was doomed. The greatest among them, the Oberith, in particular, a group that included Pazuzu, Pale Knight, Dagon, Bekard, Ugadink, Vroth-kun, Kabiri, Ubathar, and many others, joined with the most powerful among them, Obox Ob, and found a way to siphon all of the remaining life force in that multiverse and use it to punch a hole, a pathway, into and through the void between. These beings couldn't transport themselves as they were. They had to become purely psychic entities, pure imagination. They became the idea of themselves. The most powerful, the most sure and dominant made this transition with their form more or less intact, but the vast majority of other Oberith were shattered, sacrificed, and merged into a violently insane mass of fractured parts, all desperately trying to reform into individual minds and egos again. The greatest of the Oberth, Ibox Ob, absorbed this vast energy and extracted from it the most pure expression of evil, and with it created a beacon of this pure concept that lanced across the void and gained the attention of the most powerful mind that was staring into this same void from somewhere else. And thus, one of the most potent primordial powers of the Dungeons & Dragons multiverse saw something in the void and made mental contact with it. In a fraction of a second, Obox Ob and all the other Oberth poured into Tharizdun's awareness like a virus. They boiled into existence within the bizarre edges of possibility that is the very limits of Tharizdun's imagination, what was and still is the Far Realm. Suddenly Tharizdun had the power of a force of pure evil with which he could shatter the barriers between any reality he wished. It could destroy absolutely anything, and it gave him supreme power to reorder and undo all of reality. His imagination was filled with madness. He felt a strong urge to manifest this shard of ultimate evil in the realm of imagination and belief itself, the astral realm, where he could use it to immediately obliterate all other powers and be the one and only power. But other aspects of himself across distant planes and parallel dimensions just had enough basic restraint to instead give him that sense that it was perhaps wiser to test it out first, in the same cosmic construction site that the primordial powers had used to form the prime material plane. Thus Tharizdun instead manifested the ruby shard of ultimate evil deep within the heart of the elemental planes, and from his feverish and twisted imagination poured the Oberth lords, each arriving as a foreign thought, a weird concept in Tharizdun's mind, which the primal power then manifested into reality. As the other powers in the D&D multiverse recoiled at the incredible shockwave with which we can barely even describe, and quickly reacted to try and contain this disaster somehow, the manifested Oberth broke the shard away from Tharizdun and plunged through the hundreds of dimensional barriers in order to secure their escape and freedom, and the notice of the distracted powers. This was the birth of the Abyss, and the eventual inevitable doom of the D&D multiverse. Also, something to consider. Other primal powers of other multiverses may also have made mental contact with the shard across the void. There may be other mental duplicates of the Oberth Lords which were manifested in those other realities. This may not be the only Abyss, and the corruption may be far worse than even we can begin to fathom. Best not to think about that too much. Eventually the gods figured out a way to contain Tharizdun and prevent him from manifesting anything else or carrying out his idea of unmaking reality and starting over. His prison seems to be mental in nature, since no other power other than his own could possibly contain or control him. So basically, Tharizdun is trapped in his own imagination, where he dreams. While he dreams, the Dungeons & Dragons multiverse exists. When beings within the multiverse somehow gain access to his dreams, the Far Realm pours out into the multiverse and threatens to begin breaking down all barriers between mind and matter, and eventually unmaking it all. Whatever else happens, Tharizdun must never wake up. Some secrets are so incredibly important that mere mortals should never know such things, delve too deeply into forbidden lore, and risk running into the dark forces that protect all of reality, such as the dreaded undead god of secrets, Vecna. Many of the more inexplicable balances of power in the D&D multiverse hinge on such secrets. Thus, to the unaware, they seem to make no sense at all. Why do the celestial powers not step in to stop the blood war and deal with the forces of evil? Could it be because the true powers know just how tenuous a situation they really exist in? Maybe. It could be that the celestial realm is not here to police and fix the multiverse. It merely exists to guard the one way out, and is preparing itself endlessly to fight an unwinnable battle merely to buy enough time for the worthy to escape before it all comes crashing into utter ruin. Who knows? Meanwhile, Obox Ob was not happy. His plan to become manifested within the astral plane and immediately convert all of this new multiverse over to one of his own design had failed. Instead, he was left burrowing through the dimensional barriers, one after another. It was like he was a worm trying to get to the core of an onion, but as he dug into it, it just seemed to expand with more and more layers. The closer he got to the very heart of the multiverse, the further away it seemed, and the more weird and disconnected the new planes seemed to be. The Oberth have alien minds. In the multiverse they come from, Most travel was between dimensions. The transitive planes were just masses of conduits to different realms, and the prime material was nothing more than a void space, filled with garbage no other being wanted in their own pocket dimensions, and populated with teeming masses of vermin. So Obyx Ob, Lord of Vermin, was a supreme power, well adapted to dominating planes who naturally viewed the prime material as largely worthless. But still, it was progress, and as he expanded into and created the Abyss, his tremendous load of energy dispersed into it, beginning its own transformative process, corrupting and mutating raw matter into the organic forms which the fragmented Oberth minds manifested in order to regain individuality and ego once more. Thus, crawling out of concentrated ooze-like pits of the seething corruption, the first demons started to spawn, but they were wild, chaotic, crazed and confused, most having no idea what they were or where they'd come from. The trauma experienced by every demon from their shattering and recreation from the imagination of a god-driven insane is something no mortal can ever truly understand. Suffice to say, the first demons, and the majority of them to this day, are random in form, and know only a core mentality of rage, pain and confusion. There is a strange sameness to this. Those who spawn and manage to survive for more than a few hours are by necessity generalists. Only the most adaptable make it. Those whose forms are too weird and minds are too broken quickly become nothing but food for the rest of the spawning horde. The territory of a spawning pit is a cannibalistic killing ground for demons which constantly winnows down the mass and ensures only the strong, capable and predatory survive. Where do these layers of the Abyss come from? How accurate is it to even call them layers? Much like the Feywild and the Shadowfell, there were once additional parallel dimensions of the prime material. In places where natural cosmic divides existed, there was a chance that the shard would break through somehow, from some random other place. These were once planets within crystal spheres in the phlogistons. These were once the personal domains of gods. These were once parts of the great cosmic wheel of the outer planes. These were once great chunks of the elemental planes. When Obyx Ob broke through into these places, the Shard of Ultimate Evil shattered reality and created random conduits, connecting one location with thousands of others in a way that no mage or god would ever dream of doing. It was as if some insane power had simply grabbed the entire location and tore it loose. The conversion of these planes was so brutal and immediate that the native lifeforms there often had no chance to adapt, and everything died horribly under waves of snarling and savage demon spawn. In many planes of the Abyss, lifeless wastelands are the norm, with nothing but ruins of what once was. Also, it's possible to walk among the ruins of worlds that currently exist, but at some point in the far future, they may have been torn free of space and time and become another layer of the Abyss, added to the chaotic maelstrom of shattered reality. After all, time is just another dimensional barrier to Obyx Ob and the Shard of Ultimate Evil. Obyx Ob at that time was a vast entity, occupying many different planes simultaneously. His physical form and his mind existed cohesively regardless of what part of reality any segment of it was moving through and observing at any given moment. He was a being of pure chaos, a nightmare that drove any creature native to the D&D multiverse insane just looking at any part of him, as they were literally seeing the destruction of reality right before their eyes. Obyx Ob was a conduit for the shattered Oberth concepts of their original form, and in order to bring them back into reality, he had to keep consuming and converting vast amounts of new territory, connecting realms, stealing energy from the past and future, using Tharizdun himself to construct, in his imagination, a new order of things. In essence, Obyx Ob was like a virus, stealing raw materials from an infected cell to construct more of itself. Obyx Ob was so powerful because he was, in part, made of the insanity of a greater god. Now, as you digest that, let's take a closer look at other Oberth Lords who slipped through intact and now found themselves in this new, malignant reality. Formerly masters of their own pocket realms, now left scrabbling over the ruined scraps piling up as Obyx Ob's corruption slowly overtook a new and infinite multiverse. Some, like Pazuzu, adapted to it well, assuming new forms and blending into a being who rose to dominate many of the border layers between the Abyss and the rest of the multiverse. He styled himself as the prince of the lower aerial kingdoms and kept many of the forces of elemental air at bay. as they were on the early forefront of the battle in the elemental planes against the formation and spread of the Abyss, which seemed certain to completely consume the elemental planes and thus spread corruption to all parts of the prime material plane much more rapidly. If the elemental forces, in particular the genies and the Wind Dukes of Aqua, the Ifrit and the Tao, had failed to stop this, every time a wizard summoned elemental power created walls of stone, decanters of endless water and such, demonic essence would pour into the prime material plane instead, and all of the elementals would have been replaced by demons long ago. This, the first pivotal battle for reality, was waged not by the forces of the outer planes, but by those of the inner planes. And here is where we come to the story of the Queen of Chaos, the Spider Fiends, the betrayal of Obox-Ob, the creation of the Tanari, and the corruption of celestial forces, which resulted in the realm known as Bator, which we know as the Nine Hells. Bator is the realm that has been broken off from the cosmic wheel, and then retaken by the celestial forces and brought back into the outer planes. But doing so created the celestial beings now known as the Batizu, the devils. This plane is still very much at risk, and represents the demons' best hopes of managing their original goal of invading and corrupting the outer planes of the astral realm, so its strategic importance is absolute. This is the reason why the celestial forces will never wage an all-out war against the devils. They need them there to protect them against the Abyss. How long has all this really been going on, though? It's often hard to imagine, or as the Dungeon Master, to accurately portray the infernal beings that the player characters are dealing with. They're sometimes tens of thousands of years old. The Demon Lords are even older. We're talking hundreds of thousands of years of experience. They were around before human beings even existed. For example, the Queen of Chaos and Obox-Ob existed before the world of Toril was even created. The time of Obox-Ob's rule and the events that resulted in the rise of the devils is called the Age Before Ages. It's hard to say how long one era lasted before another began, and it's unknown exactly how the Queen of Chaos attacked and killed Obox-Ob. It certainly must have occurred on multiple different dimensions simultaneously. My personal theory is that she figured out the connection between the sleeping god Tharizdun and attacked Obox-Ob on a conceptual level via the Far Realm, but I have no idea really. It would have been a nigh impossible task that required tactical genius, and it would most likely have involved the unthinkable move of manipulating the mental state of Tharizdun himself, which could very easily have resulted in the complete destruction and remaking of all of reality. It was the most risky gambit ever undertaken, not just because it could end the multiverse, but because any being willing and able to do that was automatically the enemy of all other powers in the multiverse. So the Queen of Chaos wiped herself from memory. The Queen of Chaos once had a name, but in order to protect herself, she removed all traces of it and forgot what it was. I could not even tell you if the form she has now was her original form, were it not for the historic records of the Vati race known as the Wind Dukes of Aqua. The Queen of Chaos's current form is that of a corpulent woman, with the lower body consisting of a beaked octopus maw surrounded by 10 mauve tentacles, her head sprouting green and noxious hair that looks like seaweed, crowned by the skull of a huge Sahuagin. She carries a powerful weapon in the form of a trident, and currently resides on the 14th layer of the Abyss. The Queen of Chaos has remarkable strategic genius, which is perhaps only exceeded by her unbelievable ego and thirst for power. She was most likely the first of the Oberth Lords to look beyond the squabbling for new territory in the expanding borders of the early Abyss, instead looking with more interest into the largely ignored prime material plane, and it was she who discovered that life already existed there, and that these life forms had these things called souls, which were very different to what the Oberth were used to, and a much more powerful resource. And then I guess she must have made the connection in that moment between the power of Obox-Ob and his control over the shattered soul stuff from the old and broken multiverse they'd all come from. I read one account that claims that it was her observation of a mortal soul in a freak occurrence, accidentally fusing with the elemental plane and manifesting in the birth of a genie, and in that moment she put it all together and hatched her plan to cut off Obox-Ob's power, usurp it for herself, create her own army of slaves, and dominate the multiverse. So, let's say the end of the Age Before Ages was her alliance with Miska the Wolf Spider, the demon race he commanded called the Spider Fiends, and her assassination of Obox-Ob. I should point out that her alliance, a very personal alliance with Miska, created the Spider Fiends. She and Miska spawned a vast number of these things, which include the variations called the Kaku, the Spithruku, the Raklupus, the Pisarazu, and the Lycosidolith demons, all sharing similar features. They're basically spider wolf fiends. It was these that she and Miska used as the very first wave of demon assassins to infiltrate and attempt to wipe out all social order and governance in the elemental planes. This was a whole new tactical shift from the perspective of the elemental planes inhabitants. It was cunning tactics in place of brute force, and they could sense that some massive internal shift had taken place, and they were now in a whole different kind of war, one not led by Obox-Ob anymore. The Spider Fiends, working together, were highly effective, and the war was most certainly going in the Oberth's favour. But then, the potent artifact called the Rod of Law was created by the Vati and deployed in a famous battle on the plains of Pesh, a battle which involved atrocious sacrifice of life on the part of the Vati that they've never recovered from, and with it, they struck down Miska the Wolf Spider, removing him as Prince of Demons, and in the process, whether planned or not, sparking total rebellion in the Abyss, where all of the Queen of Chaos's clone trooper Tanari rose up against their Jedi Oberth masters. The war effort splintered, the head of command of the Tanari war beast was cut off, and the inner elemental planes were saved, forcing the surviving Oberth into exile and hiding right up until the present time. When the Queen of Chaos struck down Obox-Ob, she destabilized the Abyss itself and liberated vast amounts of what was to come to be called the demonic energy. With this and the mortal souls that were trickling down into the Abyss of their own accord, she employed the special powers of the Cybriax Oberth to spawn all of the Tanari forms that we know of today, including what would turn out to be her greatest creation, but now her bane, and completely beyond her control, Demogorgon, the current Prince of Demons. Obox-Ob was destroyed, killed and dethroned, his plans shattered, but a small part of him, a manifested aspect of one of his true forms, still survived. This is the form that we know as Obox-Ob currently. It is a hideous thing. As with all of the Oberth, his true form can cause madness in mortal beings merely from them looking directly at it. This one surviving aspect escaped the Queen of Chaos's purge by hiding away in a remote layer of the Abyss called Xionin, until it seemed that the coast was clear to return and merge back with his greater self, except it was no longer there, and not only that, the Oberth were no longer in charge at all, with the Abyss teeming with demon spawn and these engineered Tanari, forcing the aspect of Obox-Ob to remain in Xionin for the time being, gathering enough power to challenge Demogorgon, Orcus and the rest, and retake the Abyss for the Oberth species to get things back on track. What very, very few know, though, is this could be much more quickly achieved if a second long-lost aspect of Obox-Ob manages to escape confinement from his original home plane, called the Blood Shallows, a marshy realm filled with large hills, while the colour of the skies and clouds were reversed, the atmosphere being white and the clouds being blue. The water itself was blood red and dangerously acidic. Currently, only an insane Bernoloth knows of this other aspect of Obox-Ob imprisoned away there, but it is probably just a matter of time before they discover the truth and find a way to consolidate their formidable power together. The other aspect of Obox-Ob shares the same general appearance, resembling a giant platter-shaped centipede, with an insane thicket of spidery limbs, each tipped with razor-sharp talons. Rather than a uniform number and distribution of them along the body, they're just haphazard. 3 scorpion-like tails tipped with jagged stingers drip black venom, and they're carried high on the body that moves with them forward, as though they were the head of this creature. However, the tail end has a thick neck connected to a vaguely humanoid head, or rather 3 heads layered one on top of the other, with 6 malevolent eyes, on a twisted face that is split open to reveal a shark-toothed maw with a long drooling tongue with a dagger tip. This infected wound of a maw roars blasphemous litanies that just melt mortal minds, while that wicked purple and red tongue flicks about like a snake tastes the air, the dagger tip a corkscrew spiked hollow like some sort of a torture device. So into the present age, Tanar'ri now rule, and Obox-Ob has been largely forgotten by the lesser lords and the demon princes of the Abyss. However, Obox-Ob is not content to rule Xionin, and constantly rages across the face of this layer, bringing destruction and ruin to the Echolids who dwell there and worship his fury. Reduced back down to his old role as the Prince of Vermin, Obox-Ob wants nothing less than to catch and torture the Queen of Chaos for all eternity. Murder Demogorgon, claim his title, and then cleanse the Abyss of the taint of Tanar'ri and return it to Oberth rule. But before he launches this plan, he first seeks to reclaim the true power he held so long ago. Obox-Ob's search for power extends to the material plane. On some material plane worlds, his cult is quite powerful. He recently almost managed to draw an entire world into the Abyss to fuel his ascension, but failed at his task when heroes of that realm opposed him by engineering a devastating disruption of the flow of magic to that world at a crucial moment during the ritual. Since this humiliating defeat, Obox-Ob has quietly observed his remaining cults, waiting for one to achieve similar chances at success in the future. Until then, these cults maintain a low profile, often basing their activities in ruined cities lost in vast deserts, where they can be close to the scorpions so sacred to his faith. His unholy symbol is a scorpion dangling by its tail from a jawless human skull covered with twisted runes. The scorpion's tail is threaded through the skull's eye sockets. His clerics are, of course, usually fairly insane cult leaders who are granted access to the divine domains of chaos, destruction, entropy, and evil. The legacy of the Queen of Chaos is incredibly important to understanding why the demons, chaotic to their core, are somehow recognizable to us in these named and fixed forms. The Tanar'ri are engineered for a purpose. They are forced to conform to programmed archetypes designed by the Cybriacs and the Queen of Chaos. Each form has a function in the greater Tanar'ri horde, and no matter where they are or what they're doing, being a Tanar'ri means that the Abyss calls to them on a very primal and fundamental level. Above all else, the Tanar'ri exist to spread chaos and evil, to expand the power of the Abyss. If Tanar'ri demons expect to be on the material plane for extended periods of time, they'll often either find places reminiscent of their chaotic homes or set about creating one. In this way, Tanar'ri who can open portals or summon other Tanar'ri to them always seek to do so, as this act also expands the influence of chaos and evil throughout the planes and also strengthens their power on an individual basis. The more demons are amassed into one area, the more power they seem to derive from each other. Okay, whereabouts is Obox-Ob at the moment? Well, it's time to take a trip to one of the worst places in the entire multiverse. Let's talk about his Oberth minions. You can think of them as Obox-Ob's nigger angels, the Echolids. An Echolid is roughly the size of a wolf. At first, they resemble the union of a scorpion and a spider with a six-legged ant-shaped body, but instead of a head, it has several skull-shaped protrusions on its thorax, littered with a cluster of unblinking black eyes. 6 gossamer wings arranged in 2 rows sprout from its back, and 6 lashing, pulsating intestinal tentacles tipped with dagger-like spikes emerge from its bulging abdomen, which drips sizzling acid and squirming egg jelly. Echolids are often heard before they're seen, the thrumming of their wings and the chittering of their many throats blending into the maddening thrum of countless Chasme demons also infesting this realm like clouds. Obox-Ob hates the Chasme, but it's somewhat soothed by the vile and extremely murderous Echolids. Echolids are intelligent, but aside from sculpting corpses into structures, they concern themselves only with reproduction. Echolids only reproduce by implanting their eggs into living creatures, including other demons and Oberth, a horrifically painful process that takes mere moments, once an egg is under the skin, hatched and voraciously chewing through the flesh. The closest thing to an emotion Echolids ever display is the gleeful chattering they produce when watching their young bursting out of a screaming host. Echolids are usually solitary. They can be found in swarms throughout the lower reaches of the Abyss, especially in arid regions with constant heat, wandering as savage predatory parasites. But within Xionin, so close to their lord Obox-Ob, they display a remarkable mockery of civilization, existing in teeming hives, building vast hive cities like towering ziggurats constructed from the resin-preserved corpses of millions and millions of victims. These temple cities feature great slave markets where hags and other evil beings dump living cargo for whatever trade they can get. These unfortunate souls are then brought to immense areas where the vile echolids partake in performance hatchings, watched by the nobility of their disgusting breed like ancient Romans watching gladiatorial combat. As you can imagine, the thousands and thousands of corpses quickly decompose under an immediate onslaught of bacteria, fungus, and countless nightmare insects that infest any dead flesh with their squirming maggots. Under the constant drone of bugs and vermin, one can hear the frequent squelching wet splatter and pops as bloated corpses swell and burst open, scattering filth as thick as mud, just about everywhere. Some have likened the canyons and ravines of Zion as nothing more than giant mass graves, and the atmosphere being less like air and more of a barely breathable stench. Enterprising hags and Yugoloths have harvested many of the worst pathogens in the entire multiverse, just from sloppy puddles of bubbling fluids on the side of a road, wending between stacks